going to open the meeting at 7:02 p.m. So as a preliminary matter, this is Jillian Prendergast. I am the chair of the Finance Committee. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Nathan?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Okay, great. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast to individual attendees unless otherwise required by law. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you as this meeting is being recorded. So please take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by this recording. So for meeting materials are on Board Docs. So we recommend that you follow along on Board Docs unless I note otherwise. And I think we can now return to the agenda. I think we can make this abbreviated meeting script here since it's just us today. So let me open up the agenda. There's a lot more buttons on here now than there were before. Wow. Okay. So as you can see on Board Docs here, so today we're going to talk about the future budget and multi-year planning. So I don't know if before we talk about that, if we want to talk about any outstanding items from the last meeting, Katie, before we jump into this meeting's agenda. I think I tried to capture hopefully what you wanted to talk about or what was left open for this meeting.
Yeah, I think we ended it with who, deciding on who we wanted to invite to future meetings prior to the, writing our comments and the annual town meeting. The school committee was going to pick a date, and it sounds like you guys did pick a date for that so that we could book around, when the school committee is meeting. So that was a big to do. And then we talked about different budgeting tools and what to use. And I believe Greg was going to see if we could have access to ClearGov, but right now we don't, if I'm correct. So it kind of got left as using the tools that we're currently using for now, if I'm remembering right on that. Am I missing any big to-dos that you guys can remember?
No, that sounds right to me.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so that sort of leads into the first point, which was the future budget and multi-year planning. So I did try to make a more simplified spreadsheet. So in the past, we have worked on a spreadsheet, and I think Bob was leading that, who was a former member of the committee. I was sort of helping with the graphs and some other points of the, we were using Excel. So I did circulate that before the meeting. And if it's helpful, I can pull it up. So right now, I've made it more simple than past versions had been. So it's easier to share it than to talk in abstract. My dog has a lot to say tonight. Hopefully it's being filtered out by the microphone. All right, so these past budgets were the final budgets from the special town meeting, as far as I'm aware, from 2019 to 2024. And the budget we're working on right now that's not yet approved is the 2025 budget. So I have a preliminary version here, which is sort of like one of Greg's suggested budgets, but it's not approved yet, obviously, so we haven't had town meeting for it. So this is sort of how the spreadsheet is working right now. So I had that there just for an example. And I calculated the average increase from 19 to 24, and that's in this column. So it's also on this tab called averages. So these are the raw numbers here. And then I calculated the year average here, like between the year itself, and then also like the total average. So this is one of the points I wanted to bring up, is an average of year to year, the best way to make an average. Sort of a math question, but I know there's a couple of different ways we could do that. But this is how it currently stands right now. So, so I calculated in this way. And then for a base projection, I basically increased every single year by this average from the past, from 2019 to 2024. And that's how I got these numbers here. And you can see, I've made some notes in these red colors. You can see that it's almost, you want this number to be 0 because you want the expenditures and the costs, the revenues to be cancel each other out. So it's not, in the past, we've done some projections where it's quite far off. I think this looks quite good because of this column here, or this row here, which is new growth. So we had a lot from 2020 to 2022. We had quite a large new growth, almost double what it usually is because of the 129 Parker development. And now those numbers are sort of closer to 300K. And this is sort of what is more historical. Like if I go back, even further back than 2019, the numbers are usually around 250 to 300. But this averages out to 12%. So I'm not sure this is a reality. So this is something I wanted to highlight as a current limitation or something we should at least consider. And another thing that's not currently on here is the new school, the Green Meadow School, because there'll be a revenue on the top. There'll be like, it cancels each other out. So I'm not sure, Peter, what you think about how important that is having in here. But because it's sort of a little different than what we're looking at, but we also need to know when PEG stops, because I think it's within the next 3 years. But these are sort of some things I called out. Other more complicated versions of the spreadsheet allowed you to change the percent each year instead of just once. But I mean, that's something that could be factored in. So any thoughts on if this is helpful or suggestions? I know there's some things, you know, these things might be good to model or even an override, but let's see if I can get my dog in the house.
So I didn't look at this before the meeting. My first reaction is, and sorry, Jillian, but there have to be some flaws in this because the deficits aren't big enough.
Right, and that's why I was like, is it because the new growth is artificially high? Because I'm not sure it's gonna be as high as these numbers. So.
Right.
But
yeah, so I think
because I mean, when we've done this in the past, we've seen
problem.
deficits of like millions.
Yeah.
I have a question. How can the prior year levy limit go up by 4.5%, and then the 2.5% increase goes up 4.5%?
Is that new growth?
Is it new growth? But we
growth
have
plus
a
the
line for new
2.5?
growth. We have
No.
another line for new growth.
Yeah, it's not new growth.
It's, I know
Yeah, I
my
was
tax
looking
bill,
at
what
that
I just
too.
got, I'm wondering if we're just a
But-
little too aggressive on the revenue.
Right.
But it did go,
Well,
it
no.
did go up, right? Because you calculated the average.
Does it also include,
But
I mean, there's a separate line for debt exclusion, so I was also confused about that.
Oh,
But these
okay,
are the numbers from the STM meeting, so I'm not sure. But
okay.
unless I
Yeah.
mapped wrong, you
But-
can always double check my
but
math.
but the
Well, the
check
debt-
on it is to divide line 8 by line 9. And if you do that for 25, 26, and 27, it is 2.5%. Part of it is, I think the 4.5% is calculated as, and I'm sorry, I don't know how else to do this, but you know, the FY25 amount of 949 divided by the FY25, or I guess it's the FY25 908, which gets you that 4.5% increase. But really, the increase is 2.5% of the prior year's levy limit. If you do that math of line 8 divided by 9, it does work out to 2.5% for each of the years. That, I mean, the percentage thing is a little weird, but actually, how did you do? Okay, so actually, so J8, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at this actually on the spreadsheet, not on the screen. Jillian had sent around the spreadsheet. I don't know if people want to look at it that way.
Which one? J8?
Yeah, okay, so the prior year levy limit should not have a percentage increase, but should be the prior year's levy limit plus the 2.5% increase.
What about
So
the growth?
for oh, you're right. Yep. Actually, good point. Yep.
Because that's why the average
We
is
don't know
on-
the actual for. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So if you did. New growth as the budgeted amount. Yeah, I mean, so if you assume we have actual new growth of 300,000 for FY25, or wait,
So
Julian, I'm
change
sorry, I'm
J-
confused on the I through L columns. You have labeled as FY25, 26, and 27. But I
Yep.
think they're really 26, 27, and 28. Or are
So
you
I
needing
didn't,
to
I just have
two
this. Yeah, I just have FY25 for reference, so you can see how close the projection is to what their preliminary budget is right now, if that makes sense.
Ah, okay, that does make sense. Okay,
I have a question in debt exclusion. So will the Green Meadow building, like, is something, I know we have some debt falling off and we'll take that on. Is that a wash, or will the Green Meadow building cause that to be a much higher number?
So I left it blank in this green row right here, because I don't actually know what it is yet.
That's
But there
the
should be a line for it in the revenue at the top and also in the expense at the bottom. So if you look here, see how there's Fowler construction reimbursement? And
Yep.
that fell off here in 24. So like that is done. We paid,
Yeah.
it's done. It was paid for in 23. So if you scroll down here, it was also a line item somewhere under expenses. But I don't notice it, obviously, right now.
So
it
if I
would
may,
be in
Jillian?
capital debt service exempt.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Bob.
Hi. I think Peter was
It's
just
the
going to
famous
say,
Bob.
yeah, right. It's not, it's excluded from the operating budget. So you put it in both as revenue and expense. Because we track it, and part of the reason we track it there is that we still pay taxes on the debt service, but it's excluded debt. So it doesn't factor into the 2.5%. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think the way it shows up is a reduction of that excluded debt capital debt service exempt. That if
Are you
you look
you're-
at the numbers from 23 to 24, you see the big reduction, which is the Fowler School coming off.
Mhm. Which line you're at? Which line are you speaking to,
Line
Peter?
49,
Yeah, so further down.
it's right there.
The difference
That
between
drop
these two highlighted numbers.
Corresponds, yeah. There's other factors in there, but the big drop is the Fowler coming off,
Right.
which, Bob is right. We lose the income and we lose the expense, so it doesn't really affect anything. But that's not how schools are financed now, just to be clear. We won't have to deal with this going forward. Either for the high school or for Green Meadow when it actually happens.
Did that answer your question, Katie? I'm not sure it did, but
No, that made sense. It
okay.
did.
So that number, the expense should match or be very close to the number in the revenue for debt exclusion money. Does it match?
Yeah, I don't know why it's different. Well, it doesn't match because of the 897 that was Fowler School income. But for FY24, so it's 2537, and it's 2558. I don't know why they don't match exactly. The expense is 2558. I'm sorry, 2,558,000, and the income is 2.537 million. So, they're within 10, 15,000 of each other. I don't know why they don't match exactly.
But for us, it's pretty much a wash, right?
Yes.
Not
wash
for
the
your
operating
tax bill,
budget.
but for us as FinCom, yeah.
Well, for the
Yeah.
operating budget, yeah. That whole debt exclusion is basically to say it doesn't add into your, what your limits are for increasing the budget year to year. It's by definition excluded for the length of the bond. So what you're really worried about is whether or not the deficits make sense, given that you're using just percentages. What did you say, Jillian, from the last 3 to 4 years?
Yeah, so I took the percentage from each year to year. So this is something that was in the old spreadsheet where you could sort of modify each year.
Yep.
And then I took an average of these percents. So I don't know if that's the best way to do it.
Well,
I think we have to evaluate it line by line. And the first thing is I think the real estate revenues are overstated in the summary. So, projection on the revenue. So if you took J8 there, I just make it Greg's number because that's the right number. That number isn't going to change and it's not a factor of anything else. And then that should be 2.5%, or it should be Greg's number the same, the 874.
We just add 2.5% to that each year.
Yes.
So assuming new growth of 0.
And
then there's a line for new growth, and that would get added in, and then we take 2.5%.
Well,
Yeah.
no, because remember, we're duplicating FY 25 here. So this is the same as H.
I also want to point out that column J is it says fiscal year 25 at the top, but it's taking fiscal year 25 from Greg's numbers and then adding the percentages in the orange column to it. It should probably be referencing
Oh,
the
yeah.
values in column G, not column H.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did this quick. That's what's happening. Okay.
All right. Maybe without getting into the detail of the numbers, because it's probably more productive for one or two people to work on it than to try and do a spreadsheet by committee.
Yep.
I think the basic question still holds. I'd be curious what you simplified doing a percentage by year and into just an average percent. You said you simplified this a little bit, Jillian. Was that the simplification primarily?
Yeah, that's one of the simplifications is that all of these numbers in this column in the projection will increase by whatever percent you put in this column.
All right. The other thing to talk about, so there actually is, I'm now seeing your Green Meadow school reimbursement line. There won't be an income line like that. That's the old way of doing school financing.
Okay.
I think one of the questions would be, is this the adequate amount of detail? And that would primarily be looking at column A and the rows. So I like this better than Greg Johnson's format, where he just has a total state aid number. And we at some point decided we wanted more state aid broken out, primarily because of that charter school reimbursement line. No, I'm sorry, the
Yep.
assessment for charter schools line. And then, you know, frankly, in recent years, the school choice line also. The local receipts line, so that combines everything. I'm going to speak up for Kevin, where he's not here, and say, I suspect he would like to see trash receipts separately listed. You know, there's a lot of focus on the marijuana tax, but frankly, it's not that much money. But it may be that we want to
I
review
mean, I think
local
trash
receipts.
is even less than that, isn't it?
No, trash is like 600,000.
Okay.
I mean, it's roughly $1 million for the trash contract, and we collect about 500,000 in stickers, and half of it gets charged to the operating budget, roughly. And then, you know, further, the expense side, we've kind of settled on these categories. I think they generally make sense, but maybe someone wants to argue, I don't know what, but something should be more broken out in this.
Madam Chair, could I ask
Do
just
you
one
have-
question? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, yeah, no, I was just going to ask, you're putting this together to, I mean, I assume, I hope it's true that the finance department is trying to put together a forward look of at least a few years too. Is that true or not? And maybe not on
That is
ClearGov.
correct.
They are doing it, right?
No, that is not true.
We're not doing it on Clearview.
We're not,
Right now.
okay. And is the finance department trying to do a forward look at the next few years, or only FinCom at the moment?
I think just us.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's too
Greg,
bad.
my understanding is that they don't have the resources to protect more than a year right now.
Interesting. Okay. So one thing that they are doing in the finance department, at least for this year and presumably next year, is like you see at the end of a warrant, you can see every detail for all the subcategories to these high-level categories. And that means that you can see all the local receipts broken down by excise tax and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how periodic they put that report together, but you can always go back and get more detail about that. I mean, honestly, an example I've come up with to talk when I was talking to some people about needing a near-term solution for senior center, we could look at the COA budget and say, one of the ways to fund, and put aside some money for the near-term lease of a space would be to raise that budget. So, Greg has that information from probably Kevin Peterson. You guys could ask for that so that you could see it, but it's daunting to try to share this. So I guess the other question I have is, you're doing this so you can see and tick and tie these, or you're looking to figure out how to share this with, folks at either the February 10th meeting or the Maytown meeting. So
It's
what are
the
you going to
second.
do with
So
this?
there's-
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we would like to share this. There is no, in my opinion, there's no point in doing this in isolation.
Right.
So this is something, Greg is going to be coming to our meeting on February, whatever that Monday is, 5th, maybe.
Mhm.
And we're going to talk about his any updates to the recommended TA budget. And we're also going to talk about the spreadsheet and future planning and things that he might suggest or see. So
Mhm.
some of these things, I've talked to him about is like health insurance and some of these other things. So this is something that he's very much interested in. And, my understanding is the select board is also very interested in this as well. I think, like when you were on the committee, it's always hard just to get buy-in. So, and how realistic are projections and, getting people on board.
Mhm.
And also the big high level question is, what does this mean? So, what is the priorities as a town? And that's something that we can't discuss in a vacuum. That has to be discussed with the town and representatives of the town and citizens and et cetera. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks.
For example, someone might come and say, I don't, the average percent for the schools is 3.7% over the past several years, but I want it to be 8 or whatever number they want. So, and what would that look like on the budget? And how could that be shifted to compensate for? And we can also put in here overrides if we, and I know this is something that I think would also be helpful for a discussion, because I think that idea has been kicked around a bit over the past few years, at least that I've been on the committee, is, do we need to do periodic overrides like some of our other surrounding towns do to keep up with inflation and other factors? So we can model what that looks like.
So if I may, I don't know if other people have a lot of questions. I don't want to monopolize it at all, but I would just ask if you're going to share this with the select board and town financial staff and Greg, you're going to have a really good summary for instance, lines 8 and 9. Well, 8's pretty clear, but 9, what's your assumption there? Am I looking at the right ones? No, I should be looking at new growth, which is 12. Where would those, the new growth targets come from? Some of these lend themselves because it's relatively smooth percentages of change. Some don't. And certainly even the schools are probably in that category. So I guess I'm just asking the committee, you know, when you present this information, to your point, Jillian, so that you can start to hash out, is this really how we want to apportion things? You don't want it to devolve immediately into, well, that's not a realistic number for new growth, for instance, right? So maybe Board of Assessors or somebody to, you know, say what should some of these numbers, maybe it's 10 of 50 lines that need a little bit more background information.
Right.
That's
Yep.
what I
And
was
that's,
wondering.
you know, this is sort of the straw man post right now. So
Yeah.
I know there's lots of caveats. Yep. We got to start somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is
So,
good. It's the right
yeah.
time too. I mean, I'd love
Oh,
to see
I
some of
Linda.
that discussion of going back and forth at the February 10th meeting, right? That's
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if this will be ready by then, but we'll see. So I think Linda was raising their hand first.
I had a couple
Hard
of
for me to see.
things that I'm wondering might help us with projections, and that's things that might not be so much financial, but they're the drivers of income and expenses. So for instance, like if we're making projections of future growth, could we do something like get the number of building permits we've issued over the time, or like health insurance is just an astounding amount. So should we be tracking FTEs and retirees and seeing how, if we're growing personnel, and do we have to, you know, look at projected growth and things like that? I don't know if school enrollments, and we've mentioned the inflation rate, what our bond rating is. I don't know if have you ever done anything like that with just collecting or having that as background, so we could do some better understanding of the trends we see and what we think is going to happen in the future?
On this spreadsheet, we haven't had that level of detail before. But some things like that could potentially be useful. I'm not sure. I think we'd have to ask a couple different people to get those. I'm not sure if they're in the STM detailed reports, like Bob was pointing out. But like some of these lines are broken out quite in detail in the ATM and STM reports.
Well, just on the detail, the spreadsheet that I sent around with all the little line items ties to this. That it ties
Yes.
to the town meeting budget. So if you want to know, you know, what makes up that general government number, you know, at least through FY24, you have that in the spreadsheet. Oh, I think there's FY24 in there.
Was it TM? No, TM operating budget. Was that the spreadsheet?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have the equivalent thing on income. But we probably should get more like that.
This is that spreadsheet.
I mean, that's by department. This is that's
Yeah.
even more super detailed by line item. Yeah, it's got FY24 in there. So 48,663.
So I don't remember seeing number of people.
Oh.
I just remember seeing.
Well, on health insurance, the driver is not so much an increase in number of personnel. It's the actual increase for existing personnel. Health insurance really is going up 9-10% a year.
Yep.
I think,
How do you get 3.6%?
That might be really useful to know that we're not having more people. It's just medical insurance going up.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are occasional ads of people, you know, DPW would be one. But in general, the big increase is just the cost of health insurance going up. Is this really right? Only 3.6%?
What are you looking at, Peter?
The average increase in health insurance and employee benefits.
Yeah, it was pretty low, under 6 a couple of years. So that's another one. If I could throw in this other piece of 2 cents, there are 3 huge budget drivers, and then there are some that are a lot less. All of them need to be addressed, but you know, it's the schools, it's the debt service, and not debt service, employee benefits, and then quite a bit further down the list is, you know, some of the other categories. So if you look at those and you want to do an analysis on what's driving that, those, at least the employee benefits, vary a lot. So one size fits all increase may not be sensible, especially given the last couple of years. So you could take it in order of priority like that. Where would we be spending the most money, literally in dollars, in the coming fiscal year? And how does that break down? And focus on those first, and see if, you know, you get something that you can share with the select board and others to say, here's the biggest budget drivers. And I know that that's not the right term. I battle with Natasha every once in a while over that, not intentionally, but just because it's, you know, it is, and it ends up being a biggest portion of the funds we put out each year, even from new growth and other revenue. So to me, this is a good, you know, the granular detail below this is important to know is underneath it, and these come from that, and should be everybody understanding that. These aren't, you know, cut out of fresh air. But beyond the operating budget, there are other things, I think it was Linda was saying, that we could be looking at and find out, you know, what impact will those have in the coming years. And that might be an easier discussion than struggling with, especially the long spreadsheet. It hasn't worked too well in the past in my experience.
Yeah, I'm
So
not
that's-
sure I
you hit on-
agree with that. You asked a little bit, Jillian addressed, why are we, or, you know, what are we planning to do with this?
Uh-huh.
And I kind of think that we are still in the phase, we're back to trying to get buy-in, mostly for the select board, to want to use this and, you know, could try to consider budget priorities over multiple years. And yeah, I mean, yes, the schools are an issue, clearly the biggest piece of the budget. I don't know if we're at the point that we're going to like delve in to say, no, it shouldn't be as high. I think that generally leads to, oh, it should be higher. Whereas, you know, will never be as high as some people want it to be. So I'm more of the mind we should be looking at the overall picture, and particularly that net line at the bottom.
So has this is, we're looking at Jillian's now, the group of us on Zoom.
Did
So
we fix the?
did we suddenly go down into the $1.5 million to $2 million deficit?
Yep. I changed this to be the numbers that they should be.
Yeah.
These ones up
Right.
here. So I need to fix this. So this should be this. Right?
Yep. Yep. It starts right from there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I need to update some of these numbers.
Yeah. But you didn't change a whole lot of lines. You just corrected FY25, right? And then,
So this should be that. And then new growth, Greg is saying new growth is going to be like, so this right now is the 12% number, but it shouldn't be, I need to update the column because it's pulling everything from column H, and that's not correct.
You're trying to go to G for
Yeah.
going up 2.5% to FY 25, right? Yeah. So if it comes anywhere near close to what we were just looking at in the net, then it looks kind of the same as it did in 2019 and 2020 when you and I worked on this, three of us, Jillian, Peter, and myself. And what that means is, and there are people still to this day said, well, we didn't end up having to have an override, so we managed. What's your problem? These are overinflated, deficit numbers. But it happened partly because, things that were big ticket items like employee benefits weren't as high as they had been. They weren't 10 and 11%. They were 6 and 6.5%. And that makes a huge difference, right? So the dialogue that needs to occur is, where are there more fixed increases that are more predictable? And, you could say that
They were even lower. They were like 2-3%. So we really lucked out.
Yeah.
The highest has been 6%.
And that came at the same time that we had influx of tax dollars that are only hit for 1 year, and then they become part of the baseline. So the Maynard Crossing influx of new funds isn't, I think those numbers in the out years should probably be 300,000, unless somebody can point to specific, I think Linda said it, building permits or some other developments that are definitely slated to bring in new tax revenue. So if that's the case, the numbers get even worse, right? I think you just changed them. So,
Yes.
so they become more realistic, but, debt service is going to be going up instead of going down, even though that's not part of the operating budget deficit. It is higher taxes. So that's at least tied to taxes, I think, where this has to go in order to have the impact that I think the select board are looking for. So that means a summary of this tied to a summary of, what that means for tax rates and that sort of thing, I think is what is going to be the most instructive about what decisions we should make. It's my 2 cents anyway.
Now, can we tie that deficit? If we balance the budget, we should be able to figure out what the tax rate would be. I think we could back that in. We know what the tax rates have been.
Oh yeah, you could
have to be if we had a balanced budget.
Oh sure,
and that would be a big ouch moment. Yeah.
Yeah, to balance it, you're going to have to cut a lot of these line items, and they're not all, variable costs. Some of them are fixed costs that we have no control over. Like,
Yeah,
Can you
although
remind me,
we do,
is the 2.5%, is this 908 number 2.5% of 30, this number up here, the 34, or is it 2.5%? I always forget. It's 2.5% of
it's
these two
2.5%
numbers.
of row 14.
14.
yeah,
Okay.
total real estate. Yeah, so that becomes your new base. That number in 24 should be exactly line 8 in 25. Right, Peter? That number, 36?
Yes, except for the fact that this spreadsheet doesn't account for actual new growth. So if you look at G14, so the FY24 total real estate taxes were 36,111 in the budget, but Greg is starting with a number of 36,325, and the difference between those is probably, additional new growth of about 210,000.
Yep, understood.
And then from year to year, the same thing is true, that, we have, so going from 23 to 24, the 23 total is 37,458, but we start with, it's 34,810, but we start with 34,986 in FY24. And
Yep.
Again, that's another 111,000 or so of 100, whatever it is, of new growth. And anyway, that's the difference. But I'm pretty sure the 36,325 is an actual number.
Ah.
Um,
So budget versus actuals, I think, and that is something that it took
Yeah.
me about 4 years to understand on FinCom, so don't feel bad if it looks like gobbledygook to you, but it's very important to understand
Yeah.
because someone will ask you about the 2.5%, why isn't it exactly 2.5? And that's part of the reason. Right? So we can only get actuals, a year
Can
and
you
a half.
say that again?
Sorry, say that again?
Can you
Yeah.
repeat that
Oh,
again?
yeah, yep. So what Peter just described, I think it would be helpful, Jillian, if you highlight the cells he's talking about while we talk about it. So you want to go through that explanation about, line 14 and line in the next year's starting baseline. You want to try that one more time? And
Yeah.
well, because it's important for the whole
Okay.
team to understand this.
So in general, we get to add 2.5% of the prior year's total taxes. The total taxes are budgeted there in line 14.
As an
And when
estimate.
you look at, well, it's the budget.
Yeah.
And so if you look at that in G14, it's 36,111,000. But Greg is starting the FY25 budget with 36,325,000. And the difference, and those two numbers should match, except we only have 250,000 of budgeted new growth counted in that 36,111 number. And new growth must have been significantly higher by 200,000 or so to get us to the 36,325.
So another way to say it, and I totally agree with what you said, but if you go up to the top, FY23 says budget final. That's column F. FY23, the bolded, right there. So right down below it, right there says FY23, final. And then FY24 is a budget, that's an estimate.
So this is from the special.
No,
town
that's the
meeting in
actual
October.
budget. No, that's the actual budget.
It's the budget. I'm saying is the real estate, we haven't finished this. So the real estate, let's see, I don't remember what it said. It's really small on my screen. Total real estate growth. Thanks, that helps. You're saying line 14, right?
So this number
Yeah,
here.
well, that's the total
36
taxes.
This number that's in blue is not the same as this number in blue.
Yeah, fine. That's
That's
and
what we're
it's
talking
exactly.
about, right?
because the year hasn't ended, right? The fiscal year hasn't
Correct.
ended. Go ahead.
No,
What am I?
no.
Go ahead.
Because we don't adjust for actual new growth in this spreadsheet.
That's what I mean.
Each of the prior years are all the budgeted number.
Mhm.
But I think that's right. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
You could start plugging in actual new growth, but that's not what we budget based on. And all of the expenses are budgeted expenses too. We're not counting actual expenses on the bottom
Right.
half either.
And we have to be
So I think it's-
conservative with new growth
Exactly.
when we're doing
Yeah.
our budget.
Well, we generally have been.
I have a
Just go, Nathan.
question on that. For the first three columns, the total on line 14 actually does match what the next year's prior year levy limit is. It only starts getting off when line 13 starts being rounded to the nearest 10,000. So I wonder if what we're talking about isn't about budgeted versus final. It's
Wow.
actually about that line being an estimate.
Yeah. Because at some point, new growth estimated for preliminary budgets. This is something, I'm pretty sure, Bob, when I was doing this with you, that
Mhm.
we were doing it around 2022.
Yeah.
So
2020.
that might be where
yeah.
it starts changing.
Yeah. It was a little earlier than that, but I mean, maybe it just didn't get updated in 21 as well. I don't know. I could be wrong too. So yeah, I think you've caught it, Nathan. I think there's some place where there are estimates, and then they're not the actuals. And like like a lot of what Peter just said about the expenses, we don't always show the actual budget. So we're a year off of having accurate information sometimes, completely accurate. It's always close. So it's important to know that those two lines aren't a mistake that you just had highlighted in blue. They're because in the yellow column, Greg has updated to actuals. Right?
It's also a preliminary budget, so
Yeah. So he's got a starting point. It's a really good question. I mean, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, he gets these worked up by the finance group. That's, I hate to say it. Is it Kevin Peterson now? Where he gets the preliminary budget?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So they
Well,
basically,
I think Greg is doing this mostly himself.
yeah, that's right. Because he's not really the finance director, right? He's probably got his plate full. Kevin
Correct.
does. Yeah, okay. Anyway, we're completely dependent on this estimate for the next fiscal year from the finance group. And then based on it, I think we could ask questions. Is the yellow column accurate enough? And we got to make sure that it is. Actually, Peter, I've seen him find errors in it in the past. And then the adjustments we make in columns J, K, and L are all based on that. And I think that's still legitimate. I still would argue that a whole lot of them have a very stable percent increase, and a number of them are quite volatile. And I think you should probably, I mean, in the end, the way you set it up in the first place, Jillian, to have the ability to put different percentages each year, still has some merit. You can set it so that they all end up the same, or you can independently, on the ones that are more variable, adjust them a little bit independently. Because sometimes you're aiming to increase revenues over time or decrease expenses, and just having three full years of the same percentage is unrealistic. But it wouldn't be for the
Yeah,
whole
I
spreadsheet.
I just updated this column, so it should be taking from the 24 instead of.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's
the
great.
projection.
So what does it mean on net? What it says is we should be in FY25 facing some heavy duty deficit. Now, what is in the yellow column, he's saying 359, which is still a big number, but a lot smaller.
Yeah.
So why?
The revenue.
Mostly school budget.
Yeah. So is
Well, actually, the school budget's 250,000.
and what is the estimate right now? 9% for employee benefits, since those are the two biggest ones?
Looks like charter school. Charter school is one, and you wanted to see the employee benefits.
Yeah.
So his is actually higher.
No, actually, Greg has more than we do.
So for this, the school is about $1 million higher. Is that right? No, a couple $100K higher. And
So wait a minute, what is the percentage he's
you just
proposing?
look at the total.
Yeah.
I
What
thought
percent?
the most recent thing you sent, Jillian, he had about a $750,000 deficit for FY25. So it's somewhere between those two numbers.
Maybe this is a newer projection. This is version 2. I don't know.
But you haven't changed
Total
that.
tax revenue. Wait, look at the total tax revenue line. That's over
Yep.
$1 million. Don't know why.
Mhm.
My amended new growth is only 250.
Oh, your starting tax is of 34,986. Sorry, those should be Greg's column of H.
You know why? I changed all of these over to from G to H. That's why.
So that'll get us close. That's the big change. That
Yeah.
should change our deficit a lot. And then we do have the school budget about 250 higher.
Yeah, so this is,
But yeah, I mean, H and J are the same budget year.
So the,
Right.
so let's assume this is 90% correct, maybe 95, just as an assumption. It probably needs a lot of work.
I
as
like
you
your
said.
confidence, but I think
Yeah.
everyone should definitely triple check it.
Oh, absolutely. And but it is hard to do here. But if you scroll to the bottom and look at the third year out, that's a number that should be challenged by the select board and others, right?
The
And
minimum
it-
deficit,
Yeah, the 1.1 million in FY, what is it, 5, 6, 27, right?
yeah, 27.
Challenged because it doesn't reflect past reality.
No, I'm sorry, challenge ourselves to say,
Or-
if we believe these numbers, then what are we going to do about it to get to a balanced budget, right? And we can
Right,
always say
right.
we don't have to worry about that. We have done that in the past and said we'll figure it out later. But some of the figuring out is to look at the averages over the next 3 years in order to be able to make sure that doesn't happen, right? That we're that far in the hole. And some people will glibly say, well, you just do an override. And we know that we haven't done one in a long time, and we've like not to if we can, because we've got other reasons our tax bills are going up. So that, I think, is you do want the bottom line, literally in this case, to show, geez, we've got challenges. Just we can't sit on our hands saying we got through FY25 budgeting process and we'll worry about it later. Now, either you believe that or you don't. I just happen to be a big believer. So we're trying, a few of us, trying to drive that revenue higher over the course of the next 10 years. The revenue way up above, but there are headwinds against it. So some of it's inflation, some of it's water resources, some of it's, the fact that we're somewhat built out. So those are going to be real challenges. But if you don't have that deficit projection, nobody knows that has to be, priority one is raising revenues, or, by any means, whether it's, petitioning the state to keep up with some of these rising costs or whatever. I think that's the message we want to get across. I like to get across anyway. I hope that that's what the FinCom's doing too. Oh, I'm talking too much. It's you, Natasha. So, Jillian, you want to recognize Natasha?
Yeah, I'm having trouble seeing when people raise their hands when I present, so.
Yeah, sometimes,
I
yeah.
didn't see your hand.
Oh, no worries. You guys doing your thing. I had a question about, was mentioned earlier about actuals, and at what point would that exercise of just reconciling our actuals from a prior year be checked to see how much we are on par or are not? I know that we've talked about the free cash that continues to go up in returns. And I think this year is also another large number that we're seeing. Is there a meaningful exercise that, even though we want to be conservative, that we can better kind of understand where that continues to play?
I've just been studying this recently, so if you don't mind, I'll just throw 2 cents and I'll get off the soapbox. But I do look at the free cash as being in line with the Department of Revenue's expectations and recommendations. It's a certain percentage of your overall, budget, and you want it to be conservative enough. So if a big problem occurs that was unexpected, that you don't run out of your reserve funds or have to take from your stabilization in order to correct it. So I think that being closer to 1 million than closer to 300,000 for free cash is actual policy driven.
Yeah, but it's it's topping over 2 million now.
I don't know. You have a
Wait,
projection?
These numbers,
Do we have
I
a
don't
free
have it
cash?
for past years. But these
I-
are the current numbers that I got from Greg right now. So in the reserve, the capital, and
Yeah.
the general, these are the numbers that I'm
And
aware
so
of.
the reason
But
why
that's
I,
not the free cash.
no, that's not
No.
the free cash from
Wait, do we-
certified. It came back, it was posted on the state's website. We haven't got anything from Greg, but I was hoping he would share it tomorrow night.
So I
Oh,
assume
and
that
what's the number?
It was more than last year, so 2.2 million, I don't know. It was higher.
Okay, so to answer your question, Natasha, we asked the finance department for a free cash analysis that in general goes through things like, you know, new growth was up 200,000. General government expenses were down 150,000, blah, 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 and all the changes in local receipts, and that should roughly tie to the free cash number. I think I sent a spreadsheet last year, and I'm just looking for it. So I collected like 5 or 6 or I don't know how many years of that, and sent around a spreadsheet, you know, showing year by year where free cash came from. That would be the most instructive thing to kind of, I mean, I think Bob has a good point that we want free cash, and we deliberately construct our budgets so that we'll always, you know, generate some free cash. But, you know, equally it's true. You can argue we have too much free cash sometimes, and are we being too conservative about some budgets? But the tool to really look at that would be that kind of year by year look at free cash.
And I think it's just that there's two pieces. One is the free cash, which I think is just, again, a healthy exercise, you know, to look at, especially as we're seeing trends going up, and because we don't have a lot of cush. So, you know, it may highlight, you know, maybe we are continuously, you know, overestimating, or maybe, you know, we're getting more revenue and we just kind of, you know, being more conservative in our analysis. But the other part too, which I totally agree, Bob, that you do want to have a healthy reserve. The school has tapped into their reserve a lot in supporting our operating budgets last year or this year, and expect to do it next year. So the reserves are not as filled because we've needed to offset that for operating expenses a lot more. So that's where you know, the school looks at it as well, is how much are we getting back when we're, you know, we are looking to offset, because we know the town hasn't been able to fund the level of the expenses that we've needed to do. So it's just kind of all looking at all of those pieces a little bit. You know, what our end of the year expenses are compared to, you know, how do they match with our projections from the year before? You know, are they on par with the different lines, you know, actuals versus what we're budgeting for? I think it is, I mean, it's what corporate America does a lot. So it wouldn't be unusual to kind of have that as a reference point at some point.
Yeah, I agree.
this
It
what you're
sounds like the
talking about,
actuals
Peter?
would be,
You're looking for the actuals, Linda? Sorry.
well, it seems like that would be really useful. If we're just looking here at budgets and we're generating 2 million of free cash every year or some amount, that's means we're over budgeting and under budgeting in some area, you know, we should know where we're over budgeting and we know where we're under budgeting.
But if our total budget is like, I don't know, it's at least 40, what is it? It's almost 50 million now. Like 2 million is a fraction of that. Like, you want a certain percentage of your total budget to be,
And by the
is
way,
my understanding.
the free cash has been currently used almost exclusively for snow and ice to the tune of 450 to 600,000 a year, plus a number of capital pay-as-you-go, because we have not funded any kind of pay-as-you-go capital line in the budget. So if that's how we're doing it, there's consequences to say we're going to reduce it significantly. And that's along with what Peter said about where does it end up coming from? The other part of that is what have we been doing with those numbers? And is it in line with what the DOR says is healthy way to handle, your budget or not?
And I
So,
wouldn't say reduce it in any sense or looking to, build it back. I think it's just a healthy data point to understand, overall. You may be comfortable with it, but it's just a good, I think, exercise to see every year, and it sounds like, I know, Peter, you did send something out last year, but just making a place for that in the
I just,
annual budget process to be like, okay, this was our survey and this was our analysis, right? And we are fine with that. Maybe we are, and because we have all these other things. I just want to make sure that that is a factor that's being looked at, because we have seen, as from the school trend, higher up, and then we're getting lower allocations since 2019. So that's where it's great that it comes back for capital projects, but our operating expenses are also going up as well. So I think it's just a good thing to look at every year. Not that I'd want to take it away, but understanding it, I think we all probably want to understand it a little bit more and monitor it.
yeah, I mean, just looking at last year's, and I just sent this spreadsheet around again.
Okay, it's not this one that's up on the screen right now, it's something else.
Oh, no, that's somebody else. No, that's the expenditure of free cash, I believe.
Right.
Yeah. That's
Oh,
the
you're
expenditure of free
talking about
cash.
how much was actually in free cash. Okay.
You want the
I will check
analysis
my
of
email.
Yeah, where
the
did it come
analysis,
from?
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's increases in revenue that are not particularly consistent, and a lot of it's miscellaneous stuff. We got 900,000 from Parker Street as a gift to the town, for instance. That's included in two years.
Peter, I'll make you a share so you can share your screen, because the email hasn't come to me yet.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Can you see this spreadsheet?
yep.
Yep.
Okay.
It's just-
So at the bottom, just to tie this out, this is a total of what's listed in line 117, and then this is the actual free cash number from Department of Local Services. And then you can see on this tab, this is the DLS free cash number, and then our budget and the percentage of free cash compared to the budget.
Mhm.
So if you want to see that historically. But in terms of at the top are changes to income. And so, there's a lot of small changes to the local receipts that you can then see subtotals here. And you can point out, we had 100,000 more in vehicle excise last year, and we had 122,000 more of Medicaid reimbursement. But I don't know if the schools are going to keep doing that. You can see the meals tax came in over. So there's a few changes there. You can see in other years, there were more miscellaneous things, this non-recurring. So in FY20, we had 200,000 as a gift from 129 Parker, and in FY18, we had 700,000. And then there's other small things. There's some differences in state aid that show up here. Charter school reimbursement was higher than we had budgeted, and the general government. Changes in state assessments on the cherry sheet. I forget what this is like money we got from the schools that they hadn't spent some of their circuit breaker money. And then at the bottom, and then liens redeemed, I believe, is taxes we collected that had been, you know, outstanding for a while. So, you know, we forced someone to sell their property is the most likely thing there. And then you get to this section here. This is the differences in expenses versus the budget. And the biggest line here, this reserve fund, this is unspent reserve fund money that goes to free cash. Last year and the year before, there actually are some, the police department had, oh, actually, this 129 isn't a real number. I don't know why I got the numbers this way. There are some numbers here. The police department hadn't spent 129,000, but there's a note here that this is encumbered. So down at the bottom, you see this number 310,000, which is, you know, essentially they had spent the 129,000 but hadn't paid it yet. So that is meant to offset that, like accounts payable or something, I believe. But the big numbers are the unspent reserve fund, and then the unspent health insurance is actually somewhat substantial over the years. But beyond those two lines, I mean, other people can look at this, and you know, the information for each year doesn't exactly match up. So this is a somewhat scattered spreadsheet, I'll admit. But you can look at this to say, okay, are we doing something wrong that, you know, we should, I don't know, budget health insurance lower would be one argument here. But this is a percentage of the overall budget aside from FY22. And if you remember, that was a COVID year where they gave us a break of, they didn't charge us for a month of premiums, essentially. That won't be repeated. And in other years, it's not that high compared to the overall budget, I don't think. You could argue we should cut the reserve fund, maybe, given that we give so much of it back each year. But I'm not sure I want to advocate for that. But otherwise, you know, you look at the town clerk, there's, you know, we're not over budgeting there. It's hard to argue that the other ones are over budgeted that much.
And to be truthful, if you wanted
but
to
that-
say, if you got to the point where you wanted to say, you know, reduce the reserve fund, you'd have to go back another 10 years and say, what are the things when we, you know, spent the entire thing? What happened there? And is that really never going to happen or not? Because reserve fund, when you don't have it for an unexpected budget item, is a real problem, right? So,
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, I think Natasha's right. We should be looking at it. We should be clear about it. If we're following the guidelines and not being too conservative, then we have to look elsewhere to be able to deal with operating budget issues like revenue. You know, how do we increase it? How do we get more state funding? That kind of
And I
thing.
think just from the layperson's perspective, right? Because we've all kind of looked at this from every different angle. But I think that's just generally a question that we, you know, I think the FinCom, or I would want the FinCom to be able to comfortably answer. Like, yes, we look at the, you know, analysis, and, you know, it is nothing that comes out as major flags. I just think it's a good piece of the puzzle, because all people do see at town meeting is this large amount that comes back. And I think without the context to it, sometimes it leaves people to kind of form their own narrative.
Yeah.
And I think it's helpful to, just as a good health, you know, perspective, a litmus test, be like, yep, we're still kind of nothing unusual as you're reconciling and planning for the next year.
How would you go about making sure that education occurs? What would be your recommendation, Natasha?
Well, I think visuals are really, really good. I mean, it could be that FinCom, I mean, some version of this, you know, these are the areas that we've seen variations over maybe 5 years, right? And so you're not pulling out year to year to year necessarily, because people can, you know, can go through and look at that in a different way. But I think it needs to be somewhere where people understand that that's happening, you know, that they're understanding where this extra money, because it gives, so it's the name of it, free cash, by right away, it kind of lends to the argument of extra money that's coming in, but it really is compounded by different variations of the prior year's closing. So I think it's one, understanding just what the definition of free cash is. I don't think we do a really good job of educating the community. What is free cash? And free cash is, you know, the reconciliation of the prior year's closing. And then you could maybe have just a, I don't know, simple analysis of
but-
that.
Yeah, I mean, the other piece to it would be to, I mean, I haven't heard the concern that, oh, we have too much free cash. Maybe that's out there. But I think the other piece to it would be that we deliberately conservatively budget so that we generate always a positive surplus each year. And that DOR, in fact, recommends that be 3 to 4% of the budget. And that's what, you know, and that's why we do conservative budgeting. And, you know, I think that would be important too. And we can kind of leave it at that. Does anybody have any more questions on this? Again, I sent this email out just, you know, as we were talking. I'm happy to, you know, answer questions in a different meeting, but otherwise I'm going to stop sharing. Unless somebody
Thanks.
objects.
This was really helpful, Peter. Because
It
I
was,
think
I
there's a
really liked
sense that we have $2 million in free cash, and it sounds like, you know, why can't we use that 2 million? And we're being very cautious in how we're getting it, and then we're planning on how we're going to spend it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a whole separate argument that by doing this, we generate a little bit of money for capital, but I think there's an equal argument that we should be more deliberate about that. Why don't we just budget for capital? But anyway, this is the detail of where it comes from, and you guys have it now.
Even if that were not true, I have to just say this one last thing, because I agree with everything you just mentioned. But, you know, the other strong admonition from the DOR in Massachusetts laws and everything else is that you don't use free cash for operating budget deficits. And the reason you don't is what we just talked about. It varies too much to be able to depend on it year to year. And then you are really in trouble when you've hired people or done other things with money that cause an even bigger problem. So it actually, I've looked at it enough that I think we're doing it the right way. How do we give people confidence that's true? I think it takes a little bit more education, as Natasha and others have said, just as a summary. Thanks for that, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And it could be just, I know we've talked about like even if we're looking at neighboring towns or those comparable towns, like, you know, if every town is clearly having an increase at the same rate, might just be as a reference point that this is not out of the norm, but it gives that sanity check, I think, for people who are only familiar with Maynard and maybe don't have that more Commonwealth lens to look at things or understanding how we compare to similar towns.
I will say the reason I asked you the question how to do it is that you could tell people to go to ClearGov or a couple other places and avail themselves of the same information that, you know, we would. And I wish people would do it.
I go to the state website all the time.
Yeah.
That's to me is just, they do all the work.
But the rank and file that you're talking about that, you know, ask that question and come up with their own narrative don't, apparently, because yeah. So I don't know what to do about that, frankly. So enough said.
All right. I'm triple muting myself here. So, okay. I think I'm hearable. Great. So I think we had a really great discussion here about future planning. I have some notes. I'll update the spreadsheet that I shared, and I can circulate that again with these new numbers and also make sure it's posted on board docs. Is there any further discussions or topics here for future planning? So we're gonna, as I said, we'll plan to talk to Greg on February. Let me double check what the date is. February 5th. So he's going to come. We're going to talk about the TA recommended updated budget. That will be before. So on February 10th is the meeting where we have sort of that joint meeting with all the boards. So that's a Saturday, and it's usually at 9 a.m. So it hasn't been posted yet. The agenda is still being worked on. So I think my understanding from the charter is that's something that I work with the select board to set the agenda on that topic. So, and make sure that gets circulated and posted soon. But I think this year we're going to try to foster more discussion because sometimes in past years there's been a lot of presentation. So I'm going to continue working on sort of this future budgeting and planning, but I'm not entirely sure it'll be ready for quote unquote prime time on that February 10th meeting. So I think it'll be something we could possibly discuss with everyone, or I could discuss with everyone. But I don't think I'm going to do necessarily a super formal presentation. I think the goal is we're going to try to make this a lot about discussing and sort of the pain points in people's different budgets. So, but if anyone has any suggestions for that February 10th meeting, I'll open the floor here for discussion.
Jillian, I know you were out at the last time when we were talking about the school doing a presentation or whatnot. I know we're going to be coming to FinCom, and we actually are going to be going to the select board to do a presentation there next week. It sounded like the FinCom were okay with or wanting some version of a presentation for that meeting. I just want to confirm with you or make sure that we're still on par with that, but more of a scaled down version that gets more to the nuts and bolts. Is that a correct assessment that we should plan on?
That's a great question. So I haven't had a call with, I was actually going to see the select board when their next meeting is. So I haven't had a call with them about that yet. But yeah, I mean, I think we were still planning on having some kind of a high level overview, but I think in the past it was something like each person had like 40 minutes or something like that to present, and that was quite long.
I think it's going to be, it's going to be lower. Yeah,
Oh.
it's not even going to be that that much. So I just wanted to make sure, like, just for what Brian and the school should plan on for that day. And you could just let me know. I think we had heard there would be expected a school presentation, but maybe not to the in-depth discussion that we might have here with FinCom, when we come. But let me know if you're feeling that that's changing in any way.
Yeah, I will be open and transparent in that I haven't had a meeting or discussion yet about that agenda. So it's on my to-do list. So.
Could I make one recommendation that, or ask actually a question maybe? Do you think it would be appropriate to have the budget subcommittee do some quick summary of what they've been analyzing over the past few months, and what from their standpoint the pain points might be, or suggestions for improving processes in the future? Is that something that would make any sense? Like maybe I think Jillian, you and Peter are on that budget subcommittee, right?
No, I'm not. The chair is traditionally not on that committee. So Katie is on the committee with
Yeah,
me.
I've been to about 2 or 3 of them now.
Yeah. Do you think that makes sense, you and Peter? Because Peter, you're still on it, yeah?
Yes. All right, well, I mean, I'll do my thing. From my point of view, no, it doesn't. So the budget subcommittee, I don't know how much analysis, I mean, the pain point, I'm sure there are other pain points, but I think the pain point is going to be the school budget. But we all knew that before the budget subcommittee stuff started. I'm also, I mean, I've said this before, but the budget subcommittee is a small working group that, I mean, mostly is Greg reporting on the status of the budget. And I have my set of concerns that I don't want to elevate the budget subcommittee and enhance its role. I think it should be the board's. So
when you say the boards, the select board should be presenting, what they're thinking about in terms of the TA recommended budget on the 10th? Or FinCom and
I would love the select board to say something, but
that was a provocative
the select board never
statement.
says anything.
Well, that's why.
Yes.
So I understand your point, and I don't know what Katie feels about it, but
Well, my experience, and again, I've only been on 2 maybe 3. But Greg starts it with, for those that are new, it's pretty much me reading over a summary of the budget. And then like it's short and there isn't really much discussion of it. It's just kind of his reporting of like where we're at. That's kind of what I've experienced on it. It's not a whole lot of like back and forth. But I've had limited times on there.
Well, to be
And I mean,
complete-
I would say
Good.
from these past meetings, so if anyone, I think we have some new members on the committee, so maybe you haven't gone to this February meeting before. So in the past, it's generally, you know, sometimes our state delegate will be invited to give like opening or comments or remarks on sort of state level budgeting and how we can think about having
Of course.
that having local impact. And then usually Greg gets up, the town administrator, talking about his budget recommendation for the upcoming year. So this meeting is basically about the upcoming year budget. It's not like future multi-year planning, generally speaking. And then often the school department would then get up and sort of give their budget presentation and from, you know, the school committee or the superintendent's office. And then sometimes we would have people come from the capital committee. So I think last time the capital improvement plan was there talking about, you know, upcoming school and maybe the fire station, or maybe that was already on the books, I forget. And then the finance committee generally would give their perspective, and then there would be time for a discussion, and then it would just kind of adjourn. So that's sort of how it's flowed in the past from the different meetings that I remember attending. So there's generally, as sort of was alluded to, the select board sort of leads that discussion part, but there's not necessarily a presentation that I recall from that board in particular. So the question is Jill going to make a presentation? So that's, you know, part of me making the spreadsheet and starting to think about this future year budgeting is something, you know, if I make a presentation, it would be quite short, and it would be more, we need to think about the future. And, you know, I don't want to do like shock scare values, but I do want to be like realistic and say, you know, with some of these modelings, there is a projected deficit. We need to think about it. You know, do we need to start talking about overrides or other budget changes? You know, and maybe talk about a couple of scenarios. It's more getting people warmed up to the idea. So when I presented this in the past, it's been not always well received. So I think, you know, the first point on the agenda would just be sort of warming people up to the idea of thinking about more than 1 year ahead, is my personal opinion as one member of this committee.
I think that's exactly right. I think you could say, you know, I think it would make sense to allude to future deficits without presenting them all and say we're still working on revising the model. And I would, and actually I could do it from the audience too. Bob had mentioned before that the select board has concerns about our projection spreadsheet that we presented in the past because it shows these huge deficits that turn out that they're not there, that we figure out some way to balance the budget. And I think you could say something along the lines of, you know, we know that prior planning models had projected huge deficits, and they haven't come to bear, but we've looked at that and we know the reasons why they didn't. And, you know, we can present that in the future. We don't have it quite yet. Just to start to build that narrative. I mean, the thing is, when we do show the spreadsheets, they show these huge deficits. And I think the select board looks at it and say, that's not realistic. We've never had $1 million deficit. And, you know, we'll figure it out, as Bob said. However, I think we're getting to the point that it's going to be harder and harder to figure it out. So we should just allude to that. But in general, I think it is still, we're trying to build a climate for multi-year budgeting. And we still have some work to do to get other people to really sign on to it. I mean, Greg says, oh, he likes it, but he's not spending any money to generate it. So,
I mean,
that's where we're at.
would the finance director, if he came on board, suddenly be enough of a critical mass to be able to put a 3 to 5 year plan together, do you think? And is that a commitment
Well,
that
the problem
he's
is,
made?
we won't get a finance director. At this point, Kevin Peterson is in that slot as the town accountant. He may develop over time to then be a finance director and able to do stuff like that, but we're not hiring anybody else who's going to do that. So,
All right, so if that's
for
the
right
case,
now, it would all be on Greg.
so Greg, always says, and it's been said a bunch of times, but I am going to, basically throw this out to this group that you as a oversight, if nothing else, kind of body, probably see that, we're falling further and further behind in planning. And are we going to have a huge deficit and fall off a cliff? Probably not, but this is not getting better. It's getting more risky, right? If you agree that that's true, and I don't know if you all do, but I think so, then when Greg says that he reports the select board and gives them a recommended budget, and there isn't enough analysis for anybody to really dig in and say, well, what will this mean if the select board isn't demanding it? I think we should be asking them to get up in front of that group in February 10th and say, how will you be sure that you're going to commit and foster that same climate that FinCom's trying to do? And next year, find a way, with or without a finance director, to have a plan. Why wouldn't we pick this? What other forum would there be? If the budget subcommittee isn't the forum, what is? In the whole of the whole year, the whole year we go to it's not town meeting, certainly, and that's not where you do this kind of thing. You can't even have an open meeting if you don't, have the discussion with the select board unless you post it and everything else. But this is a posted meeting of all the stakeholders. So I throw it out there. I don't expect an immediate answer, but I think that we need to ask for more accountability about the budget and not say that it's the select board's job, when I don't see that they're doing that job to review, very finely the budget and tell Greg what they want him to administer. So, and I know that it's an ugly truth, but I think it's real. And I don't know if the FinCom has a role or not in it, but you're telling me the budget subcommittee doesn't, and I get that, but something else has to give if we don't have a finance director who's going to get up there and say, this is what we're facing. So I leave it for you to consider.
All right.
All right, if nobody else is, oh, sorry. Did somebody else
go
have
ahead.
something to say? I think that's quite valid and a good point to make, and would only say it might be that some other respected members of the community might say the same thing as to, wait, this is a 1-year budget. I thought I've been out of this for a little while, but I thought we were moving to a multi-year budget. Where's the multi-year budget?
Mm-hmm.
As somebody as an outsider might be able to ask that also.
It would be me if you guys, I just want to know if because I'll go, and I'm prepared to do that. But I'd like to hear a select board member say they're committing to it, and I haven't been successful in all my legal ways of talking to them to get them to agree to it. And I don't know. I'm a little bit at wit's end.
Well, I think this year will be interesting because even in the initial budget planning, when Greg starts with his, $1 million deficits back in the early days of the budgeting process, he has continually only been factoring the schools at 2.5%. I think he's going to have trouble even making 2.5% on the school budget this year. And I'm curious to see how that plays out. And, you know, I think there is, from my point of view, when we back when we had $1 million deficits in the future budgets, I mean, we were ballparking schools at 5% or something. It was
4.5,
well
yeah,
above
4.3.
2.5%.
Yep. That's right.
4.3, okay. And we've really cut that the last couple of years. And, you know, it's the only thing, it's the only line item big enough for Greg to cut from to balance the budget.
That's right.
So I'm curious what he will present. You know, I'm hoping it'll be the end of January to the select board, and then to us in February, and then at that public meeting.
Well, I would
Because,
just,
I mean, that's how we've avoided the deficits. So we'll see how that plays out. But so anyway, I think there may be enough people there concerned about the school budget that the idea that we have to do this more than 1 year at a time and set some expectations for what, you know, we've set the expectation, we're funding the water department. We're raising everybody's sewer rates because we know we need water infrastructure. That's how you address a problem. We're beefing up the DPW to some degree because we said there's an issue there. We haven't done that with the schools. And I'm hoping there will be some members of the public there that will say, what do you mean you're coming in at 2%? We're hemorrhaging students to AMSA and you're going to disinvest. And no, well, Kevin's not here to defend himself, right? But someone other than Kevin.
I'm gonna just play a snippet
like
of this
a-
recording at the meeting in the future. To think,
Well, but I mean,
oh, I just
would
got it.
hope
Yeah.
the school
See
committee would have a few, you know, knowledgeable parents there to say, hey, wait a minute, you can't just keep balancing the budget by underfunding the schools.
So,
we will
So
have some students also that
you just don't have students. Students,
we
I'm
have a
sorry, don't. It's
we have a
stupid.
student rep. That's part of what we are supposed to do. We have a student rep who speaks to who, look, you may not like it, but that's part of what the state actually requires. So we have a student rep. They've been engaged in a lot of the processes, even with the bleachers, the athletic trainer, the things that we have.
Fine,
And
I have no business telling you what to do, but I don't think they're your most effective spokesperson.
no, but
So-
they are part of the community who are going to be voting and paying taxes soon.
So could we, let me just throw this out, that I think that would create an emotional conflict. It drives more emotion than it does data gathering or leadership from the people that we know. I mean, the student rep is not going to lead us in the very near term toward a balanced budget that really keeps service levels at any significant place. They don't have the experience or the history. But by God, this select board should, right? And I think that it's time to ask them to be accountable and take some leadership role in how are we going to deal with oncoming collisions in terms of, you know, revenue and expense. And I think that's where it has to go. We should give them fair warning that we're asking for them to collect data and don't just pass the question off to Greg. That's my 2 cents. I mean, the fact that they don't speak at this budget meeting when they are the people that decide whether the budget is approved come March or early April makes no sense to me. Especially because Greg consistently says, I'm not the one that makes the decision. I'm giving you data.
Right.
And, you know, this should be a discussion of what do we do with the data?
I appreciate this. I feel like we're not necessarily going forward with new information here. So I've heard your concerns here. It's almost 9 o'clock, so I do want to make sure we get to the rest of our agenda tonight.
Sure.
I know that future planning was a great topic tonight, and I'm really excited. Everyone's very passionate about it. And I really
Did
do
we solve
appreciate
it
you
by
coming on
talking
our
about
call
it?
tonight. Huh?
Didn't we solve everything by talking about it? Oh,
No,
we didn't
but
solve
talking
anything?
about it is
No.
the first step.
No.
Well, good news for you. I have to go
Uh,
to do something that I wasn't expecting to do tonight, but keep up the great work, and I mean that very sincerely. I think this is worthwhile, but I'm gonna let you get back to your agenda, and I'm gonna sign off. Good luck, everybody.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks for coming,
coming.
Bob.
Appreciate
All
your
right.
passion.
You bet. Take care.
All right, so I do also, want to keep the meeting moving here tonight. So, so we talked about February 10th. That's something I'm going to talk more. So I've taken some notes here on some of the suggestions here for some of the topics. If there's no further topics on that one, I'm going to just jump to the ATM meeting and planning for that briefly. So the deadline for submission of warrant articles to the select board is February 28th. So, and citizens petitions are not due until March 21st. FinCom, we are expected to have all of our written recommendations by April 9th, is my understanding of our current timeline. So it's coming up quick, especially if all of the deadline, all of the town article submissions are due by the 28th. So, and we're having our public hearing on May 13th-ish, I think. I think May 13th is Monday. So, and the actual town meeting is on May 7th. So, oh no, sorry, May 20th. May 7th is the election. So if there's any articles that are also going to be tied potentially to like a vote, like on paper, that would be May 7th, potentially, unless we have a special meeting. So I know this was something for the schools. I think there was potentially going to be an article on the bleachers. So I was hoping that maybe we could talk about that at our meeting on the 22nd, as well as the budget. Does that sound okay, Natasha?
Yeah, we actually, the design team, we are going to be using the election to do the debt exclusion for the bleachers. So that's the plan, the timeline for the project is to do that first vote
Okay.
at the ballot before the article. So yeah, we can talk about it on the 22nd, and we probably will have some materials. The design guys come into the school committee meeting this Thursday, so we can give even more a timeline as well.
Okay, great. Thanks for that.
Can I
Yep.
just ask, when do we have a number on the bleachers?
They are pursuing the designs right now, so we should be getting that actually sometime in February. It's a pretty tight turnaround. We may not have a final article for February 28th, but Greg is aware of that. So we'll have a draft one. But that's what Huntress is working on right now. Right now they just settled on place where the restrooms and all going, and they've had the engineers and all the utilities and stuff been working on that. So they're going to be putting something together by February.
Right. From my point of view, and it's solely me, although I would certainly be trying to convince other people, I think we should be trying to figure out that number, finding out what qualifies for CPC funding, and then expecting the CPC to pay for everything it can, even if they, I assume it would mean bonding, similar to the golf course, that they would be dedicating a substantial amount of revenue for the next 10 years to pay for the bleachers. And I know they don't like that. I don't care. It's my money. And I don't want to pay it twice. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And to the
We have an
point
application.
that
We have
I
an
would be-
application there going through with the CPC as well, parallel. So
Right.
whatever they're not funding is what we will have to do for a debt exclusion. We're planning for the town. So that is the how we're gonna make up the difference, but they do know that we are seeking money from them. First, whatever's applicable and able to be funded. I can tell you that I went to their meeting, actually their next meeting is they're gonna be talking about our application, so I'll probably have more information to share.
Oh,
They've sent us, so we've had questions they've been asking. They wanted to know if we supported a rate increase for the CPA. If having our funding
God.
contingent on that. And I said, no, we would like you to evaluate our application based on the merits of it, and you can pursue that on your own. But yeah, so we have that. They've been very clear that they're not going to be seeking a bond. So I just want to make sure that we're being realistic. We can only ask and put in our request for money for construction. And we'll accept gratefully whatever they approve. Not sure how we can,
it's not grateful. It's our money.
it is our money,
It's
but
not some little pot of money.
yes, they do not want to do the feedback I continuously, anyway, I know I don't want to distract, but I just wanted to,
Natasha, does
Yeah.
them not seeking a bond
And-
mean that we just have to pay it with resources we already have?
no, so they can seek a bond for the or we have to then go to the town and do like a debt exclusion like we do with the school. So you
Okay,
have to do
It's
tax
right.
increase.
either they seek a bond and pay for it over time with CPC money, or the town seeks a bond and does it as a debt override, and it goes on all our tax bills.
Gotcha. Okay,
right,
Either way, we're going to do it by bond funding.
okay.
We're not going to pay it all up front.
right. So that is, right now, it looks like they're gonna approve for whatever they want, they're able to. And then the difference will be what we seek for the vote and the debt exclusion. But it does not appear that they're gonna be bonding. There's no appetite that I've heard yet.
And Natasha, do we know what the cost of the bleachers is yet?
That's what
Or-
Peter was asking, the designs. We're waiting for the
Not
design.
yet.
Huntress will have that information by in February. So within the next
And
month or so, we'll be using that as the basis for informing solid numbers specific to Maynard, specific to our needs that are not general to just a standard quote. So it'll be electrical, all of the site
All right.
aspects.
but can we get a ballpark on it?
We're working on it. Well, we're working on it. That's what Huntress, we
No,
have like this- I can now.
I think the
I'll
last
ask.
ballpark I heard was something like between like $2 and $5 million.
So I'll ask tomorrow. We have a design meeting tomorrow, Peter. I will ask what's today, Tuesday? No, I have one Wednesday. I will ask when we might be able to get, but they're working actively. They have to go before the planning board. I mean, it's just a lot of aspects that, they've been doing very great on. The most recent was the utilities and the sewer planning, because they're going to have to go from Great Road, pipe it down. So that was an analysis on that cost associated with that under the basketball court. So
The other way to put this, and again, I'm one member, I have difficulty imagining that I'm going to support recommending an article for a debt override when there is this option of doing CPC funding. And the fact that the timeline's too crunched, I don't care. I'll put the bleachers off for another year for that purpose, so that we can fund it appropriately without further burdening taxpayers. We have this pot of money that we can use for a town need, and the idea that we're going to tax people more so that, CPC can not spend it on something we should spend it on is just stupid. So if that in any way gets people to help move and to do this, we need some approximate numbers. We need to know it's roughly $3 million, of which $2 million is qualified by CPC, and then 2 million bonded at 10 years is going to be $150,000 a year, or I don't know what the numbers are, whatever they are. And that we can then go and say, yes, CPC, you should be sending that every year. And I'm sorry that means we can do less park projects, but
So I
tax
guess
money.
my question would be, since they are the governing board and the authority over their own money, how do you make a board do something that is something outside of we can request it. So I'm open to suggestion
Yes,
on how you better
we can replace them.
influence.
Why
I'm
why
not
don't they
kidding.
want to? What is their
I'm not
reason why?
kidding. This is nuts.
But why don't they
They-
want to? What is their
spending
reason?
money
I would
on
say
historical
if
bells.
FinCom wants to put forth a recommendation in support of that, I mean, by all means, throw
Yes.
your weight in
But
putting
we
forward.
need, but we need some numbers to do
Yeah,
that.
I'll get you some more
It doesn't
numbers.
have to be perfect.
Yeah, I'll send you the application, the most recent information that we provided to them, the timeline. The actual designs are not going to be back in for another month. So,
have you- Right, have you gotten, do you have an estimate of what's qualified as CPC?
the bleachers and the bathrooms, yes. The press box will have to be anything associated with the press
dollars.
box.
Yep.
Dollars wise, no. We just, right now, it's just more a matter of, they're looking at invoice by invoice, but anything
see-
associated with the press box. So designs, right now we're at the design phase. So it's the designs that they're looking at are not, anything associated with press box cannot be funded. So we're balancing that on what we have in free cash, because some things can be funded by what we received last year and some things cannot. Even just for designs.
All right. Sorry, Jillian, I know I'm hijacking this, but I want to be clear with, again, speaking only for myself. Without numbers like that, it's hard to then advocate saying, you've got 400,000 a year to spend. You definitely should just devote 200,000 to this bond issue, and to put it in concrete numbers. And that's what we need to be able to do advocacy with CPC. And then second thing is, I'm sorry all this is rushed. I get that we want to do bleachers as quickly as possible. I feel like we were rushed on Green Meadow, and it's too late now, so I can say it in a public meeting. I think we screwed up the process for that because we didn't plan it well enough. And I'm unwilling to do that for the bleachers. So I will be standing up at town meeting as the guy from the website saying, this is wrong, we should not be doing this. We have a pot of money and we just didn't get our act together quickly enough to do it. But that doesn't mean we should be taxing people more in order to do it.
What do you mean
So-
getting our act together enough to do it? Even with the numbers, it doesn't mean that they're going to still approve doing that. We could have the numbers tomorrow. We don't have,
Yeah,
how
but
do
that
you,
allows us 2 months to lobby CPC saying, you definitely should do this.
so you're just thinking it's the lobbying
You
that
need
will convince
time.
them?
What else
Okay.
is going to convince them? They're a public body.
Okay. All right. No, I was understanding, like, how is it that we can affect change to sway? And that's what I was trying to,
With time, it takes
Better
time.
understand.
I mean, you get 10 parents or 50 parents showing up at every CPC meeting saying, why aren't you funding this public thing we need to do? They'll change their tune. They're a public board.
I will say that parents,
And
just
then
to,
people can go to the select board as the appointing committee for the CPC saying, why aren't you replacing these people that don't want to spend the money the way they should? This time allows for stuff like that. If it all gets rushed, that's when we make poor decisions and we can't do things the way we should.
And I bet parents don't know the different sources of funding. That
parents just want bleachers, like kids
Yeah,
just want bleachers. Like they want to go to their kid's graduation. They honestly know that they're coming out of taxes. And I could say, Peter, I probably could, for every one parent that says what your view, there's probably 10 more parents who say, I don't care. I don't want to delay any further. We'll just pay for it. We just pay for a school, whether it's CPC or whatever, we
That-
need to get the
and
bleachers.
Voters can decide that if they want to. I may be in the minority and that's fine. But it also will be, I'm going to be telling parents, it's in the context of, well, we also may want to do a $500 override so that you have teachers too.
Yeah.
And do you really
Yeah.
want to do school plus bleachers plus an override?
Well, there's also been a question of bundling those two together.
Again, I would rather have money we're already paying in taxes pay for a perfectly appropriate project. And part of this is frankly governed by my feeling that CPC is like looking for ways to spend money. And they like doing little projects. And I don't love all their projects. This is a real need for the town.
Can I
Sorry,
ask?
Keisha, go ahead.
Yeah, can I ask that we move on? I had a question.
Yes, sorry. Yes.
No apologies. I'm interested in this. Of course, I could see CPC doing different things with their money, but anyway, Jillian, you were going over dates. Can you go over those dates again? About the warrants and the town meeting and that kind of thing?
Yep, I can do one better. I gotta take, let's see. I think Peter is the host, so I can't. Oh, here we go.
Oh.
All right, I got it.
Okay. Sorry, I don't have the list, I don't think.
No, that's okay. I fixed it. Let's see. So this is on board docs right here. So this is for planning purposes. These are the key dates here. So the deadline for all the articles is 28th of February. Citizens petitions are not due until March 21st. We have to supply our written recommendations by April 9th. Our public hearing will be May 13th. And then May 7th is the ballot vote, and May 20th is the town meeting itself. I don't know, is that big enough? Is it bigger? Oops, no, it's too big. No. I don't know what I did. Let me stop sharing.
Jillian?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry. I don't know, the April 9th, we have to submit written recommendations, and the March 20th date of the town meeting seems like a larger gap than there has been in the past. And I've always thought, usually it's about a month. And I've always thought even a month to just print the dang thing seems excessive. But now it's out to, a month and a half. And I'm just wondering, do they really need all that time? And maybe it'll be easy and we won't have a problem doing the recommendations. But that seems like a particularly long time just to print and mail the warrant.
Yeah, and these are things that I've brought up to Greg. So I
So
think
that's
we
why,
usually
I'll
have
echo it to him.
yeah. Yep.
But yeah, we don't need to belabor this, but I just noting that that's
Yeah, I
longer
mean,
than it usually
I
is.
let him know. I was like, this is a lot. This is a pretty quick turnaround for written comments, depending on what the articles are, which I don't even know what they are yet. So,
Right.
I did get some planning articles from the planning board. So the planning board offered to come and share their articles with us. They are articles on, I think there's going to be 2 articles potentially on zoning for businesses that can sell firearms or shooting ranges. So that's something, so they are going to talk about that at they have a hearing on January 9th, and then the firearms one is on January 23rd. So, so I can forward those to you for your consideration, and I can invite them maybe after they have those public hearings, so sometime in February, after the joint budget meeting. So maybe our second meeting in February, if there's any questions from the committee. If not, I'm not sure I actually forwarded those to y'all yet. So I recently got those. So I did want to let you know about those. As for other articles, I think there might be an article on the bleachers for the schools. So obviously we're going to talk to the schools next time. I'm not aware of what the other articles might be yet, but I will share them when I get more information. Is there any additional topics on the ATM meeting?
Jillian, did you say, is planning board going to come to us on a particular date to talk about those articles?
I haven't scheduled it yet. They have offered.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah, so I figured there's not, we should wait until they have their public hearings on those articles to see if there's any changes or otherwise. So I think they said their last hearing on those articles will be on January 23rd. So maybe sometime in February, I'm going to double check with the head of the planning board there. And I can forward the articles as they are currently drafted. Okay. Yeah, so if there's no further topics on the February budget or the annual town meeting, I'm going to jump to the next agenda to keep things moving. So our next agenda item was the Senior Center Committee. So this is a advisory board to the select board who will provide the select board with recommendations for a suitable senior center to be operated under the authority of the Maynard Council on Aging. So the duty of this would be sort of as an advisory body. And my understanding is that there'll be one FinCom representative on this committee that would be a non-voting member. So whenever we're on committees, it's always as a non-voting member. And I know, Linda, you had shared information with me about this committee and that you had sort of attended it in adjacency to the liaison committee that you served to some of the Council on Aging and other groups. I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk any
So
further.
I go to the Council on Aging meetings as a liaison from the FinCom. And there were 2 Council on Aging meetings that were specifically about this organizing the Senior Center Committee. One was on December 18th and one was on January 4th. The one on December 18th was because it has to be a public meeting, it was a Council on Aging meeting. But one of the select board members, Chris De Silva, was very interested because of the vote at town meeting supporting the senior center, wanted to have a special committee just to look for a way forward for the short term, long term of how to, what's the best plan. So nothing, nothing decided, very open, setting up a committee, which would include representatives of the select board, the Council on Aging, the Senior Center focus groups, the Friends of Maynard Seniors, some citizen members, and a non-voting representative of the Finance Committee. The select board liaison is also non-voting. So they just talked about the structure of the committee on the December 4th meeting, which was also a COA meeting. The different groups had actually selected representatives, and then the next meeting is scheduled for next Thursday. No, sorry, January, whatever's the Thursday, January 18th, I think it is.
Well, you muted yourself, Linda.
My thumbs can only do so much. So that would be whatever's the Thursday, January 18th. And they haven't set regular meetings. And there's no idea of how long this will take, but basically to advise the select board on a way forward in the short term, in the long term. People throughout, they've looked at a number of places over time. People have looked at a number of places to rent, to possibly buy, but this would be a more systematic look and looking at, how we would possibly, what it would cost and how we would possibly fund a senior center in Maynard. So they haven't actually done anything yet, but they had 2 organizational meetings, and they'll be kind of off and running on January 18th. I'm not sure how frequently they're going to be meeting. Will be virtual. The Council on Aging does all in-person meetings, but this group will be virtual meetings, and presumably in the evenings. Seems like it's better for people in the evenings.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding from attending some of the select board meetings as a liaison to that board is that they've just appointed a handful of the members. I think at the last select board meeting last week, maybe that was. So my understanding is also yours, that it's sort of still forming and figuring out exactly the directions. From the select board meetings, I personally didn't get a very clear understanding of what concretely this board is going to achieve, or what they would like the board to achieve that hasn't already been achieved by some of the other individual groups. So I think that sort of mission statement, I guess you could call it, is still being fleshed out. But they have sort of called on us to see if we would elect one of us to be a non-voting member. So I'm not sure, Linda, if you have interest in serving in such a capacity, or anyone else on the committee, but.
Yeah, I'd be interested. It's sort of tailgates or, works with the work that I do with the sitting in on the Council on Aging board. The Council on Aging board, the thing that's going to occupy their work for the next year is a big study by UMass on the needs for a needs assessment study for a senior center. So that will very much engage the town in that research. But if anyone else was interested, that would be good too. And I know they're having one meeting, so I don't know if they're going to meet. I can only imagine they're going to meet more frequently than once a month. But I'm not too sure. And the agenda of the next meeting, I think, is to pick some officers, get some recording going, and they'll be fully constituted. So it would be not as a meeting of the Council on Aging, but as a meeting of the senior center planning group.
Yeah, I personally, as one member of the committee here, if you're interested in it, I think that would be a very strong boon for that committee, since you're already involved heavily in the Council on Aging as well. I feel like you have a lot of really great background information from that too. So, Peter, would we need to make a formal motion to elect someone to a subcommittee meeting? I don't remember how that works. Like, did we do that when you and Katie were on the budget committee? I don't think so, right?
No, I
Not
think
so
so.
much for budget subcommittee, but for something like this, probably. I mean, I would have said yes. But, I mean, I think we do when we, we're on like the charter committee. I think we have when we did a Green Meadow School Building Committee. But I may be mistaken too.
I mean, I don't think it hurts, right?
Yeah, yep.
All right.
So then would I first a motion to approve Linda to is it the Council on the Senior Center Subcommittee? What is the title of the committee, Linda?
Okay.
Senior Center
question.
Committee.
Senior Center Committee, Senior Center Committee.
To the Senior Center Committee.
Jill would
I'll
like to
second that.
second that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, Jill would like to second it.
Okay.
Right, so we had a motion, we had a second. Do we have any further discussion? No, all right, so I will take a roll call vote. Linda?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Khadija? I saw you say yes, but I didn't. hear
Yes.
you. Okay, thanks. Nathan?
Yes.
All right, great. I am also a yes. So that is unanimous. Thank you very much, Linda.
Yes, thank you.
You're kindly welcome. And as the oldest person on the committee, I'll be the first one at the senior center.
Can I just ask, did the select board, or I suppose you guys, when you start the committee, is there any discussion about the interaction between the committee and the report from the Council on Aging, or the study from the Council on Aging?
Yeah, a lot of discussion about that, because that will be on, be
Okay.
ongoing. Really talking about trying to engage the community, and so there'll be a lot of interaction, I think, between the Council on Aging, all the groups, to make sure we get good input on, as the UMass group is surveying the town, doing focus groups, doing their demographic research, that they get a lot of input that would be useful in terms of planning the space, planning what kinds of needs seniors have. So there certainly is, I mean, it's a nice timing, because that will be, it's starting now in January, will be done in October. So I think, that will really help figure out how much space you need, what kind of space, what kind of services seniors need. A lot of talk about rising seniors, really trying to engage people who are, I forget the Council on Aging, I think, is 60 and over. But talking about people who are aging into that, really trying to tap into that part of the population. Talk about, a lot of people have seen a lot of different spaces around town, and everyone's got, their eye on any for sale sign or for lease sign, what might be available. They talked about, I guess the state police are going to be moving out of there. The Fusion Center is going to be moving. So lots of possibilities, but nothing for certain.
Okay, thank you.
All right, great. Okay, so that is topic number 3. Topic number 4 is routine agenda. So I haven't heard from Kevin, and I wasn't aware he wasn't going to come today. So hopefully everything's okay. Maybe he got COVID like everyone else in my family did. I feel like a lot of my people I know got COVID over this holiday season. So hopefully he's doing well. So I don't have any minutes, prior minutes for approval today. So for the future meeting agenda planning, our next meeting is on January 22nd, 7 p.m. So our main topic will be talking to the Maynard Public Schools. So that will be talking about the annual town meeting budget and also any articles, so like the bleachers. So if we have any additional talks, so it sounds like if we could potentially get some estimates for the bleachers to advocate for other sources of funding as well, or just understanding what's been submitted to the CPC. It sounds like that was something we'd be interested in potentially from our discussion tonight. Are there any other topics or questions? So I think right now, the town administrator budget is increasing the schools by something like 2.5% in this FY25, and I know the schools themselves have advocated for something closer to 8%, which is, I would say, given historical values, is something I remember from the past, it being closer to 8, and then we usually settle on a number closer to 4, but in these past couple of years, it's been maybe closer to 3, so are there any potential questions for the school budget itself or otherwise that we might like to give Natasha ahead of time so they can maybe plan on any questions we might have? Or things we want to see at this meeting?
Yeah, I have a question that it seems like, you know, people ask for a certain amount of a budget and then they're allocated a lesser amount. How do, Natasha, how do you make that work when the school department is told you only have so much, you're going to have to cut? Is it generally you cut positions, you cut programs? I mean, you don't have to answer that now, but I think it's would be interesting as a, you know, historical perspective of in the past we had to cut this and then we were not able to offer that, or, you know, something along that lines.
So that came up in this budget planning, and you'll see some of that discussion in what will be presented. It will be staffing. This particular, you know, it's staff. What it does inhibit also is just the opportunity to grow. Like we're kind of stagnant. So like the needs of kids right now, we're seeing a lot more high needs children coming in, matriculating into the school. And so there's been a lot more emphasis on needing counselors and nurses. And so ESSER funds are also sunsetting in 24. So, you know, that also kind of compounds we've had counselors who are funded there. We had a nurse who's funded there. That kind of compounds some of the issues. So right now, there are staffing. There was an evaluation of like class sizes. I know, Peter, you had asked that at one point. So you'll see that analysis in the presentation of, you know, if we drop a block and it goes up to 25 or 30, you know, students at different grades. So there's that discussion has happened at the different schools. Dropping and staffing at the schools for I forget, a nurse, a counselor, a nurse. There's a couple of different positions that they've looked at. But, you know, we also have relied more on our school choice funds. And those are not, as Peter knows, aren't the revenues coming into school choice are dropped quite a bit. So relying on funds that are actually not being replenished at the same rate is a risk that, you know, we're kind of moving along, and we just have the drivers that you had mentioned earlier, which are not new, you know, transportation benefits. We do have something for awareness for everyone is 80% of our staff are at the highest tier for in their contract. So that is something that, you know, Maynard feels. We don't have a lot of staff turnover in the sense of teachers, which is a good thing for students, but you know, over time, you know, they are at the highest level where they can from a seniority perspective. And so, you know, it kind of, you know, goes, you have the good and the bad with that. So
Yeah, 80% seems high.
80% is high for where, you know, where they are. I think in a few years, you might see, like we call them the sequoias. So you
Mm.
might see them,
Retiring.
yeah, retiring in the next 5 years, but we don't know what that would look like and when, and so. But if there's anything
Natasha,
anyone
I'm
thinks about,
interested
yeah.
in if you look for any efficiencies where we have the 3 schools so close to each other, in terms of, like you mentioned, nurses, can we share nurses? Can we share counselors? Any,
Yeah.
so that would, you don't have to answer it now, but that would be something I'd be interested in, is you look to share resources
We
where
did.
you're in short supply.
We've done that on short term, a couple of years. We've cut a principal, assistant principal. We had going back and forth, to the school for a 1 year cut that works. For a long term, it doesn't. It's not sustainable because then you have the needs of kids are growing, and that's a role that really kind of helps with reaching out to parents. And you also have nursing. We tried outsourcing nursing at one point, just thinking that might be from a benefits perspective. But we found it to be not as safe for our kids because they don't know our kids as much. So when you have kids we're seeing a lot of kids who require more medication, and you run the risk of someone not being familiar with. So it comes with, or can you get someone on call if someone's out sick, is familiar with. So there's a lot of areas that we've tried in the past few years to look for savings, in that regard. The nursing one has been one that is grown out of 2 things. One, just a lot more illnesses that we're seeing post-COVID, and then a lot of kids who are needing a lot more medication, and only nurses are able to administer them during school. So, but any questions that come up, please feel free to send them to Jillian, or email me, whatever, and we can try to have Brian prepare a little bit to address them. Some of them already will be in the presentation, but
And on the bleachers, from what Jillian had sent, the bleacher numbers, which it looked like we were renting bleachers for about 40,000 a year. And I thought it was in the millions to build bleachers. And I don't even understand about the bleachers, why renting isn't sustainable. It seems like it's so cost effective. So that would be my question when we get to the bleachers, or one of my questions.
no, I think that's Brian can probably help answer that as well. They're meant to only be temporary. We still don't have, like, the press box that hall has to come down where it's at right now. That's all built on, so we would still have to build a press box is right now on the old bleachers, which is not really should be used. And the temporary ones are not to the full capacity of seating. So you still have, like, during games and events, it's a smaller size that's been rented. It hasn't been really to meet the needs of home team, away team, or graduation for all the families. You have a lot of people standing still. So that number has only been just to kind of get us by. It's really been at a smaller scale than what, again, you thinking about long-term as well. I don't know, over 30 years, if that would really be savings if you're renting every year.
This is probably a silly question, Natasha, but I've only been in a few of these where, like, if let's say Greg doesn't approve, the 6% difference that the school is asking for, which is significant, does the school then propose ways to make that happen? Like, they go to town meeting and propose an override? Like, does the school come up with solutions to be able to meet that gap if it's not met?
I would say that for everyone, it'd probably be better that we're more aligned on a process moving forward.
Yeah.
I think that year that last year was probably, it was not great for the town, right?
That was
That
an
we're not,
exception. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's not what we would want to do, but the reality is that, we'll have to advocate for, whatever it is the needs of school as much as we can.
Yeah.
We also have contract negotiations that are ongoing as well. So there's, like, this X variable that will be playing a part in FY25 that's still unknown. Sorry, got a little coughing
Making you
fit.
talk too much.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah,
I had
we're making you talk too much. Sorry.
Jillian, I had the flu, and our whole family though. So when you were saying everyone was sick, like everyone was sick over
Oh,
the
it's really rough this year. This is
terrible.
one of the reasons I don't have my camera on today. So
Yeah, no, it's terrible. I can feel like it's at the end of the day. So anyway. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha.
all right, yeah. So that'll be our meeting next time on the 22nd. So I'm gonna work to get that posted. So that'll be our main agenda topic. I don't think we'll have much other ones. I might put on future planning, but I think we'll probably plan to talk most to the schools. We'll have the future planning and the ATM planning on the agenda as well, and also the routine agenda. Are there any other topics for our next meeting on the 22nd that people feel are pressing and should also be included? All right, I'm hearing a deafening silence, so I think that is a no, which is great. So also to give you some idea for, I call it future planning. So in the following meeting afterwards, which would be February 5th, I'm going to invite Greg so we can maybe talk more in depth about that future planning before the February 10th budget meeting. So at that meeting, I'll also present updates to the spreadsheet and otherwise that we can talk about. And for a meeting before the ATM, hopefully by then we'll start to have an idea of what the town articles for the ATM will also be. So we have a couple. So a meeting in February, one of them, I'll invite the planning board to come. Not sure exactly which one yet, but that is what I have on the books here for future planning. Our final topic for the night then would be updates from chairs and members. So I have a whole bunch of updates. So I don't know if anyone has less updates that would like to go first, or perhaps
I only have
more
one
impactful
update.
updates.
I have a very minimal update. So the Green Meadow Building School, MSB, but anyway, the school building committee met today. And it was pretty short. There wasn't a lot of new information. They're doing some, I took a picture of it. It's a test bore program for the ground source heat pump system. So they drilled a few sites to test out spots and soil, and they're going to get a report back within a couple weeks, and how effective those spots and tubes and placement would be in conducting heat. So that will be interesting. There was also discussion of using those sites where the thermal wells are going to go to potentially use solar canopies, the structures. That will be a significant cost savings for the town. So somehow in joining the sites that those are all used on. So just more design process. Nothing was being voted on in major today. They're making some subcommittees for design development, and construction document subcommittees. It's just a design subcommittee. And I think that was about it. I did find interesting the old numbers before we got the increase from the MSBA. Maynard was paying 65% MSBA, 35%, but now it's 56% Maynard and 44% MSBA. So that's a great jump up in percentages, which raised us from 29 million and change to 36 million and change. So it was a good bump up we got, which is great. And that cap isn't capped forever. It could pop, I think we talked about this last week, Peter, you had that question. The cap could go up, but right now that's the new cap. And I'm sure it will likely stay that with interest rates where they are, but yeah, so that's about it.
All right. I guess I'll launch into my little spiel here. So I've been busy talking to other leaders of other committees. So I talked to the Capital, the leader of the Capital Committee, Doug. So they're hoping to give you an idea of where their planning process is, because I know we talked about maybe perhaps using that ClearGov system. And right now the Capital Committee is using that to try to project what capital costs might look like in the future and things like that. So this is something that Doug is sort of troubleshooting with his committee. So they're hoping to have sort of this more solidified and all the capital projects by year end. So that was in like last year in December. So, and then it takes them about 2 to 3 months to understand, discuss, prioritize, and rank all the capital projects. But it might be a little slower this year because they're switching to that ClearGov system from this sort of spreadsheet system they used in the past, like an Excel spreadsheet. They're not entirely sure how that software will work out, so they're gonna start working with that. So I'm hoping to maybe invite him to talk to us in like April, because I think that'll give him enough time to go through that process and the software, and he can kind of give us an idea if he found that software helpful or if the spreadsheet they used in the past was more helpful to them. But that's sort of my update for the capital committee. So I'll take a breath and pause there if there's any questions on that. All right. Okay, so other things that I had here to let you all know about was so we got extra Chapter 90 funds this year. So I believe I forwarded that to you all. We got about 134,000 additional Chapter 90 funds. So that came from the fair share tax, which is that new tax that the state voted on, is my understanding. So Chapter 90 is used for roads and sidewalk repair and their related operations. So it's not for other stuff or like snow and ice or any of that stuff. It's for repairing roads and sidewalks. Our current availability of these Chapter 90 funds for eligible projects is roughly $916,000, rounding up. It's like 915 and some change. If we want to look more onto this, so this sort of factors into that pavement management plan that we've talked about in the past for some of those acceptances of new roads and things like that. So the last time that plan was presented to the select board was April 4th in 2023. So my understanding is that Justin is sort of updating that plan right now, and I think they present it like he presents it once a year to the select board. So that's something that they're going to plan for that Chapter 90 stuff this next round coming up. So we got a little additional money from that Fair Share Act. So just wanted to let you all know about it, but it does have obviously restricted use because of where it's located. So there is also a annual town report that is coming up. So that is due to Greg February 9th. So that's coming up soon. I wrote sort of a report, and I think I circulated that all to you based on what we've seen in the past. So, I mean, it's generally like a report saying like, this is who's on the committee, you know, what do we do? Like, this is sort of, you know, copy paste from stuff in the past, and then sort of changes in the past. In membership, there's usually a paragraph about that. So sometimes people will put like the month that they joined. But I'm going to be honest, I don't personally remember the month, so sorry about that. But if that's something you'd like to put in here, we can put that in here. And then, you know, one of the most important things is sort of talking about what did we do with the reserve fund in the past year, and what did it get transferred to, and how much is left over that got transferred to free cash. And then sort of what our activities are. So if you all want to look this over and let me know if you have any other suggestions, just let me know. This is the current draft. So
would you prefer that we just email you any comments?
yeah, I mean, we can talk about it here if you think they're large comments. If they're like, Jill, you don't know how to spell, which is totally 100% true, you can probably just email and let me know. But, you know, definitely the floor is open if you want to talk about certain things. I can pull up the lines and stuff like that. So
The only like substantive thing was, do we want to mention anything about our discussions with like the Green Meadow School building project? Because that seems like to be like the most substantial like financial thing of the last year.
Yeah, that's a good point. I struggled with this honestly a bit because I think a lot of that happened when I wasn't actually the chair. So I was on the committee though, so that is a fair point.
I think it looks good as written. But that was the only thing that seemed to be like potentially missing.
Yeah, okay. And just you think something in there about how we talked with them about the whole process and things like that. And we had liaisons to the, who were the two liaisons to the Green Meadow Building Committee?
Kevin is, but he's never been to one, but it's me and him.
Okay.
I don't know if he remembers he's a liaison, maybe, but yeah, right. It's both of us right now, and I think he's a newer one. I think there's only been a couple meetings that he's been appointed for it.
Okay. I guess we can talk about, I can make a line in there about how we made the recommendation for the ATM article to approve it.
Yeah, that might be all we need to say.
Okay. Peter, I think maybe you've written some of these in the past. Is there any like big things that I should do otherwise?
No, I don't think so. I mean, do you have prior copies of it?
Yes,
I mean,
that's sort of where I got this from.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I wouldn't stress too much about it. I'm not sure how many people ever read the annual report. So honestly, I was somewhat formulaic about it. You know, updating numbers and names of people and stuff.
Yeah, that's how I approached this one. So, okay,
Yeah,
sounds good.
I wouldn't stress too much.
All right. Great. Okay. So, there's also sort of as a procedural thing, the select board has, and I think I forwarded the memo about performance recognition programs. So this is something that gets presented at the ATM, and apparently one person from FinCom is like appointed to like review the applications and vote on them. I don't know if voting is the right word, but like nominate. These are generally like, I think, volunteers or either employees who work at the town, and they get this nomination at the town meeting. So I don't know if that's something anyone's super passionate about. I think I did it last year. So just throwing it out there. I think of all the years I was on FinCom, I wasn't even aware this was a thing. So I think, I'm not sure if the chair usually just does this process, Peter, but.
So I'm confused. Do we just say
In general,
like,
it has been, but
Okay.
and does that person just like endorse the person being nominated?
So what happened last year was we got sort of someone in the department or otherwise would nominate and say, you know, I nominate this person for their performance because of XYZ, and they sort of fill a form out, and you read all these different forms, and there's a couple different categories, and you know, you say like, out of these 3 people for this category, I think, you know, I would probably say this person I would recommend this person for the reward. And so I think there's someone from school committee, select board, and FinCom. I think those are the 3 people that like, and then they look at the votes from each of the committees and go from there. I think you have to like rank them.
I see.
So, I don't
Sounds like
mind.
the chair would be the
doing it.
most appropriate.
I mean, unless that's something
Yeah,
you want
I
to
don't mind.
delegate.
I just wanted to sort of make everyone aware of it, and you know, unless someone is like, oh my gosh, I really need to do that, I don't mind doing it, so. I think it historically has always been the chair, but it doesn't have to stay that way, is my understanding. All right, so it sounds like I will continue on that process, which is cool.
I will
Um,
be attempting to do the same thing as you are and passing it off to someone else Thursday, just in solidarity.
Yep. No bites here, so.
No
we'll see.
bites. All right, maybe
Um,
more success.
No bites. You gotta do better pitch than I did. That's what it is.
I'll work on it. I'll work on it.
All right. Okay. Yeah, sounds great. So I think those were the main topics. I did also want to let you know and Khadija, you might know about this. There was for the state supplemental budget, which is also called the SUP, apparently. That was signed by the governor a little while ago. So in our original budget, we had like 200K earmarked for the town to support renovations at the 61 Summer Street for art space. I don't know if that was the one you were also on the committee for.
Yeah, that's the committee I'm sitting on, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't,
so, but they replaced language for that. So those funds aren't going to go to the town anymore. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. So it sounds like that money is going to go to art space for their purposes instead of to the town for
Yes.
renovating 51 Summer Street. So
yes, we're in the planning phase. We couldn't use the money anyway, so.
okay.
As I
Alright,
understand it,
I think-
the state revenues were way off. And they cut out Healy cut 373 million, all the local earmarks she cut, I thought is what she did, because the revenues were so far off. But I don't know.
I'm
Um,
not personally
that.
sure, but that could be good
Yep.
to ask Greg when he comes on February 5th.
Well, that just happened. Has she actually sent the stuff out yet? That just happened today. That wouldn't be.
Was
the-
it today? Yeah, it was
51.
it was very recent
Yeah.
that they,
This
Maybe
note
that's a
I have
different
is from
earmark.
before the winter break, so this is probably older.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a supplemental budget this fall that's separate from these cuts Healy's doing.
Yep. All right, so that's all I currently have on the agenda and on my notes for today, unless there's any other pressing topics from any other members.
Can I just ask one question? Khadijah, the email I sent to kbrown@townofmaynard.net was returned. Is that?
So I am email challenged. I only get email through my personal email. I cannot access the town email address for some reason. I'm going to meet with someone this week and try and figure that out. But my email address is brownkhadijah54. Anything else, I don't get.
Okay, would
Do
you
you
like
want
me
me
to
to
use
use
that
that or
personal
not?
one?
Yes, please.
Okay,
And that's Gmail or where?
Gmail. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. brownkhadijah54.
That has to be a 54, really. Wow.
What? Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. There had to be a 50. Yes.
I-
There had to be a number to
yeah.
it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Google or Gmail has a lot of people.
Yes.
yeah. There's 53 other ones, so that's why you had to be number 52. All right, sounds good. Okay, so I will entertain a motion. There's no additional topics.
I motion we adjourn.
All right,
I will
Khadijah
second the
motions we
motion.
adjourn
We
at-
will adjourn.
All right, and Katie seconds it at 9:46 p.m. All right, any additional discussion? Nope. All right, we're gonna take roll call vote. Linda,
yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Khadija,
Yes.
Nathan?
Yes.
All right, I am also a yes. So thank you everyone for attending tonight. And we will see
you.
you next time on the 22nd.